Evolve, the game created by the developers of Left 4 Dead. The game that received 60 awards, was called the best multiplayer game of 2015, the most acclaimed game of 2015, the most anticipated, and, of course, the game that failed and died in a span of a couple of months, then got relaunched and died even faster. Some people loved this game, some hated it, yet most of players from the both sides couldn't play the game for longer than 10 to 15 hours for various reasons that I'm going to tell you about in this video. It's a story about the risks involved in trying to innovate, the consequences of overhyping and not being able to deliver, and how publishers sometimes go too crazy with their ambitions and desires. Let's go. The tale begins with Turtle Rock Studios, a developer team standing behind games like Counter-Strike Source, Half-Life 2 Deathmatch, and Left 4 Dead. Out of those, you can surely say that Left 4 Dead was the most successful title made by them, and successful is a pretty light word to say here. Turtle Rock Studios were acquired by Valve right before the game's release in hopes to expand on the console market, and you might notice that Valve haven't made that many console games or ports, at least good ones, so you can understand how those plans went. After some employees moved from Turtle Rock to Valve, the former has decided that it all wasn't worth it, except for Left 4 Dead, which they had the rights for even after the split, since the team was too small now to produce AAA titles and they were let free again after the game's release. That's where the people remaining in the team have decided to go independent, and while the positive hype from Left 4 Dead is still there, make a game that can prove that Turtle Rock still, rocks. They come up with Evolve, which wasn't actually a new idea, but a thing they kept in mind from the early 2000s. You see, not everyone played video games back then, but somehow most of the developers' friends had a copy of some kind of a hunting game. That sparked a thought in their minds that apparently everyone is keen on hunting, at least if we're speaking about the USA, and if they make a game that has hunting as a core mechanic, it will certainly go places. Unfortunately, I can't know the truth, but I think it was a really bold assumption, considering that their friends probably weren't teenagers. Chances are those were 35-year-old plus average Americans who just happened to like hunting, cause it was one of the only hobbies they could have in their teenage years, and they probably didn't play the hunting games that often. I don't know what the devs had on their mind, but I doubt that it was a good audience to aim at, especially considering what Evolved turned out to be. Anyways, it doesn't matter that much in the end, because even though they had the idea for the game, they thought it was too ambitious for it to even be made with the tech limitations in the 2000s. So they kept that idea alive in their heads for a better time. And boy, what time could be better than the Left 4 Dead release, going independent right after it, and the next gen consoles coming around in some years. So this was it. Evolve was going into development. They chose CryEngine 3 as the game's engine, since it allowed for crazy jungle environments and generally looked great. You can remember Crysis as an example of CryEngine's capabilities. This was one of the only things that in the end actually turned out to be good in the game, because it looked pretty nice. They had found the publisher of THQ to financially support the game, but it went bankrupt pretty soon after that, so Evolve went under the wings of 2K, a child of Take-Two Interactive, who bought out the rights to the game for $11 million. All that happened in around 2010-2011, with plans to release in 2015, so the game had a lot of time to be made well. But what was Evolve in general? The game has received 60 awards even before releasing. It had to have something going for it, right? Well, you can't deny that, it did have something. The core idea of Evolve is 4 people hunting a big monster that is also controlled by a player. The match had several stages, that being the monster eating wildlife around the map to level up, the 4-player squad searching for the monster while it's doing that, and if the squad failed to find and kill it, the monster was much more powerful and now was the one who hunted the other 4 players, while they tried to defend. Whoever kills the other party wins the game. This was the whole gameplay loop. Evolve didn't offer pretty much anything besides that, yet it was marketed as one of the greatest things to come out in the recent years, with the critics' reviews saying such hopeful and amazing things like intense, genuinely thrilling, and one hell of a game. You know, when that's all you have to say in the trailer of, perhaps, the best multiplayer co-op game ever made or something along those lines, I wouldn't think we'd be having any good products. But it still got the awards and all that, so we had to be getting a good game no matter what. There were some playtests done with people saying it indeed was the best experience they've ever had in multiplayer games. But you'll be doubting those people's sanity after I dump out the biggest pile of crap on Evolve in the next few minutes, and it will all be straight facts. So first of all, the gameplay. It was very unusual for multiplayer PvP games to be asymmetrical, so the 4v1 factor pretty much became the whole identity of the game, with the devs pushing hashtags and mentioning it pretty much everywhere they could. And you might understand that there were reasons why such games weren't made that often. It was very difficult to keep the matches balanced out. If you think about it, there are a lot of things that can go wrong on that part. For example, you have to give the monster enough power to single-handedly stomp 4 players at the same time, yet let the same monster fight somebody 1v1, they'll obviously win them 9 out of 10 times. And the Wolf had different soldier classes, different monsters with different abilities, so it definitely was more complex than just a 4v1 deathmatch. Did it make it more balanced though? Hell no, it didn't. The monster of course was pretty overpowered in many situations. As many people said in their reviews, to fight the monster successfully, you had to properly communicate with your teammates and everyone had to do their class's job perfectly in order to kill the opponent. If one person failed to do something, it almost always meant losing. And if you know multiplayer games, you know that this was the case for most of the matches played. Balance was not good from the very beginning and it was very hard to fix without changing the whole game. Besides this, I already told you that the gameplay loop was pretty simple and the same for all the matches. That ultimately meant that the moment you spend around 10 hours in the game, you start to feel bored and the game starts to feel like a chore. Contributing to that were the starting match stages, where all you did was run around the map trying to find the monster and the monster trying to run away. It might be fun at first, you know, thrilling, but when you do that for dozens of matches, it starts to become the part of the game that you hate with every fiber of your body. It was boring, unexciting, and everyone during that phase just waited until the actual fighting begins. It was so bad that the whole game mode was later introduced that just deleted that part from the match, starting right out with the fighting. But if you think about it, the boring part was at least something different for the gameplay, so when people tried to play the quick game mode, the game started to get boring even faster than before, since now it was just a 4v1 deathmatch. Some of you might remember that I said Evolve wasn't just a deathmatch game with all those special abilities. Well, I lied to you, since it was just an illusion. People mined the same monsters and soldiers, did the same things over and over again, and that all-around gameplay was becoming common fairly quickly. And you might say that most modern games are the same on that matter, which is partly true, but remember that Evolve was considered an innovation in the industry, the ultimate game that was supposed to be so interesting that you couldn't stop playing. But in the end, it was just another PvP shooter with the 4v1 factor and all that hunting idea being just a gimmick rather than a core thing. For many people the game ended after unlocking all the characters. All you had left was to just play the game over and over again, which not many people wanted to do. Wait, did I just say unlocking all characters? Well, what a fucking big lie that is, because Evolve is one of the biggest microtransactions shitholes to ever exist, especially considering it was made in 2015. Many characters were locked by paywalls. Wanna play that monster? Take out your wallet, punk. Not to blame that on the devs though, but on the Take-Two Interactive, who had probably gone crazy when publishing Evolve. You had to pay for anything imaginable in the game. Skins that look shit, characters, even maps were planned to be sold like DLCs, although that one, fortunately, did not push through, because they said that we want to be fair with our players and let all people play on all maps, with only difference between paying users and the ordinary ones being the character choice. And one of the main devs of the game said that Evolve is potentially a game that can work with DLCs so well that no other game can match it on that part. Quite funny, isn't it? To unlock everything in the game, you had to pay around $300 total, including the $60 price for the base game. You had to give $60 to have half of the game locked up. This obviously wasn't accepted well at all, with the game receiving overwhelmingly negative reviews on Steam, a feat that not many games can indeed achieve. So there's a true award for you. Considering the sky-high expectations the game had and all those problems, it did not go that well. In a couple of months, the game went from 27,000 people peak to 7,000 to 4 to 1 and eventually to the hundreds. 60 awards, absolute belter of a game, and only 100 people playing it. That wasn't the end though, since, you know, Take-Two Interactive told people that Evolve was going to be a long-standing franchise, just as GTA and Red Dead Redemption, imagine that. 1.5 years later, after the release, in July 2016, the game went free-to-play in hopes to regain some audience. And regain it did, having 51,000 people playing concurrently that month. But did the game change though? Well, partly. The quick game mode was added, as I said, some classes were made more casual with giving the exclusive perks of one class to all of them, and some other attempts at balancing out the game. But you can't change the whole game, can you? If you give a plate with shit on it to the customer, making the build smoother won't make it much better. So the game went from 51,000 to 13 to 5, and you know the rest. Another attempt at reviving was trying to hold some esports tournaments, at least inviting some tryhards in, but that only showed off the game flaws even more, since watching the matches was insanely boring due to the boring gameplay. It didn't work out, speaking shortly. So, Take-Two takes down the servers of the game, then boots them up again, takes them down again, and so on. It is obvious that the game died and did it twice. No matter how many times you reboot the servers again, no one is playing. But could Evolve be good at all? Probably yes. No one argued that the idea was unusual, and people did have fun initially. It's just that the balancing issues, the lack of content, a whole ton of microtransactions and pay-to-win DLCs from day one didn't let the game live. And it was pretty much done wrong from the very beginning. Turtle Rock Studios knew how to make co-op shooters, Left 4 Dead being the perfect example. One of the things that ruined Evolve was that you couldn't really play alone. I mean, you had bots, but you can imagine how boring it was to play with them when the whole game relies on you communicating and team playing with others. Left 4 Dead was different. You could even say it was built to play alone in some way. Spraying off crowds of zombies is a task that you can do without needing absolutely necessary help of others. Besides that, if you played Evolve with friends, no one could play the monster, you could only play the 4-man squad, which led to confusion and long lobby search times, as apparently not that much people wanted to play as a monster. I can imagine the game being much more fun if you had a 5-man lobby of friends, but nah, you can't do that, right? So that's Evolve for you, the most acclaimed game of 2015 that turned out to be one of the most boring games of 2015 and the years after, overhyped, mismanaged and badly designed. Turtle Rock tried their luck again with Back 4 Blood, which is ultimately a Left 4 Dead clone, so they couldn't go much wrong with that one, such as they did with Evolve. Did the industry learn something from it? Well, considering that most of the games are now microtransaction hells, you could say no, but it's still us who accept all that. I wonder why we couldn't do that back in 2015 though. If you want to hear more video game stories like that one, sub to the channel and stick around. Thanks for watching and see you next time.